Hare Krishna. Question: is secularism against the Vedic tradition? Because the kings would support the sages in the Vedic tradition. So, secularism, is it in keeping with the Vedic tradition or is it against the Vedic tradition? Answer: the word secularism has multiple meanings and it has emerged in a particular historical context. So, without considering that context, we cannot apply this particular concept on the Vedic tradition. So, secularism emerged in the Western world, which was governed by the Abrahamic religions, which are in general characterized by the idea of that religion being the only way to God. In the Jewish tradition, they're considered to be the chosen people. The Jews are considered to be the chosen people of God. In the Christian tradition, Jesus said, "I am the only way, and none shall go to the Father except through me." So Christians consider Jesus the only way to God. And the Quran also considered Muhammad to be the seal of all prophets. And the way to Allah is through Muhammad. So these traditions, the Abrahamic traditions, as they have been understood and practiced, even in their mainstream versions, have claimed monopoly on access to God. And because of this monopoly on access to God, they have led to sectarian violence against other traditions. That means, if my way is the only way to God, then other ways are wrong. And other ways need to be destroyed. The false gods who are being worshipped by other ways need to be destroyed so that the true God can be worshipped. Now, we see between when there was reformation in Christianity and Christianity split into Protestants and Catholics, then there was almost 100 years of repeated intermittent warfare between Christians and Christians, only between the Protestants and the Catholics. Similarly, there have been the Crusades, which have been wars between Christians and Muslims. So, the Abrahamic religions, because of claiming our way, each religion claims its way to be the only way, so it leads to intolerance and violence. And in European history, what is called as Enlightenment, when some primitive Christian beliefs were rejected, and science was made into the main way of acquiring knowledge. So subsequently, as historical developments took place, it was felt that if there has to be peace in society, then religion and state need to be separated. So this idea came primarily in America, where people were given the right to practice their religion, whichever religion they wanted. And then the idea of a secular state gradually emerged. The history is complex and we are not going to historical detail, but the broad contours of the development of the concept are that concept of separation of state and religion, so that the state would not favor any particular religion but would allow different religions to exist according to their own, according to individual citizens' preferences. That was the idea which came in the West, and then gradually it spread all over the world. So there are two different issues here. One is the separation of the state and religion, which secularism implies, and the history of religious intolerance because of the claim for monopoly to God. That was the context for this concept of secularism to emerge. And in India also, because of repeated Islamic aggression and Hindu persecution of Hindus, there is violence. And the Indian government also felt that for different religious communities to live cooperatively in the same country, India needs to have a secular constitution. So now, if we look at the Indian tradition, as contrasted to the Abrahamic religions, which are quite which claim that our way is the only way, the religions which have evolved in India, the dharmic religions in general are much more tolerant. So they have different understandings of the truth among themselves. The dharmic religions are broadly Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism and Hinduism. Now if we see, there is practically no history of wars between these religions because of religious intolerance. Some occasional sporadic incidences of conflicts might be there between specific groups of people, but in general the huge kind of warfares which characterize the Western world were not there. Now of course we can say, even in the Western world the religion was not the cause, the hunger for power was the cause, that is true, but definitely the religious belief in my way being the only way, that definitely contributed to rationalization of that kind of violence for the power hungry. So if we did not have, if we just put out the Abrahamic religions and considered only the dharmic religions, then we would not have this conception that religion causes violence and that religion breeds intolerance and we need to separate religion from the state in order to have religious freedom. So now what does this imply? That the separation is not required. We will see that yes, the Bhagavad Gita talks about Raj Rishis, and Krishna gave the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita also to a Raj Rishi, that is Arjuna. So Raj Rishis are the recipients of spiritual knowledge, and they are also meant to be promoting spiritual welfare in society by applying that knowledge in society, by keeping society on the path of spiritual welfare. Now if we look at the society of the Mahabharata or of the Ramayana, then we see that even in that society there were people of different spiritual orientations. There were impersonalists, there were personalists, there were Shaivites, there were Vaishnavites, there were Smartas, there were Sankhya philosophers, and when especially the Ram, Lakshmana, Sita or the Pandavas are going through the forest, they meet different sages, and it is clearly said that this sage was of a particular disposition. This sage was an impersonalist. So for example, when the Bhagavatam says that Shamik Rishi was more of the father of Shringi was somewhat of an impersonal orientation. Now he was also given respect by Parikshit, or Parikshit Maharaj repented that he did not give respect to him. So the Pandavas, they give respect to the sages, whatever be their particular denominations. Durvasa Muni is considered to be a manifestation of Shiva and is a worshipper of Shiva. He is also respected by the sages, by the Pandavas, by whoever it is, Ambarish Maharaj or whatever. So the point is that the kings, the Pandavas themselves were Vaishnavas, but that did not mean that they outlawed all other forms of spiritual orientation or belief. So there can be a society wherein, at least the Vedic model was such that there doesn't have to be separation of religion and state. There can be the state practicing a particular religion, and in spite of that there can be facility for other religions or the category religions which we have now, like Islam, Christianity, Buddhism. They are not there in the Vedic Hinduism. We're not there in the Vedic context, but we have different systems of philosophy. We have Vaishnavism, Shaivism. So they were there, and on a few occasions, sometimes some Shaivite kings they persecuted some Vaishnavas. There is some story in the Ramanuja tradition, but they are very occasional and sporadic. In general, the Vedic tradition is inclusive. That means it includes different denominations of people with different orientations, and that's why the spirit of secularism, which we say, if we have two things, one is the rigid separation of state from religion, and second is the state having a particular religion but not imposing that religion on others and not outlawing or persecuting other religions. So the Vedic model of secularism is the second one, that we don't, if there is separation of religion and state, as is done in today's secular society, secular world, then that leads to the increasing materialism and atheism in society, because the governmental apathy towards religion breeds that kind of mentality. But if the government support the head of state, the king may have a particular religious orientation, and the king may support that, but the king does not oppress or persecute those of other denominations. So if there is that kind of historical context, that kind of administration which emerges from a broad-minded inclusive tradition, because none of the Vedic religions claim that they are the only way. None of the dharmic religions, not Vedic religions. So therefore, we can have secularism in the sense that there is no persecution of other religion, of any religion. There is the freedom for people to intelligently choose what they want to practice. But at the same time, there is not governmental apathy. Krishna himself is God, he is omnipotent. But at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he gives Arjuna the choice. Arjuna, deliberate and decide what you want to do. So that was the broad Vedic tradition. Deliberate and decide. Not use force to impose one's beliefs on others. Not use even governmental power to impose one's beliefs on others. But the government can facilitate for people. So the government would support the Brahmanas. And the Upanishads feature kings sponsoring discussions between scholars of different denominations. And then the scholars will come and discuss, and the best scholar would be considered to be the Raja Pandit, would be given special prizes. So the point here would be that the kings would support dharma in general, a dharmic culture the king can support, the head of state can support, and specifically the king can have particular beliefs, but the king will also tolerate other beliefs also. King will not stamp out other beliefs. So that tradition, if you see historically, it is because of that tradition that many religions have sought refuge in India, and they have got refuge. When the early Jews were persecuted in the Middle East, they came to India, and they continue to live today. The Parsis, they came to India when they were persecuted in the Arabic world, and they came and stayed in. Even Christians, when they were persecuted in the Roman Empire, they came and they got welcome over here. So the Vedic tradition, is it secular? Yes. And is secularism against the Vedic tradition? Not exactly, in the sense that the spirit of secularism, of allowing different people to exist, different people with different faiths to exist, that is very much enshrined in the Vedic tradition. But the feature of secularism nowadays, of completely divorcing religion from the state, that is not appreciated in the Vedic tradition. Thank you. Hare.